It's probably a few
Good
things we can
evening,
mention.
ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures. Kind of cut you off there, Ben. Sorry, buddy.
Good.
Tonight we're on episode 291, and we're talking a little bit about vehicle upgrades for bushcrafting. And just like I was telling Ben just before we started, because I do know we're rolling in a few minutes late. I was running a little bit late. This is my fault tonight. The thought was, both Ben and I have kind of done some upgrading to our vehicles to get us a little further out there in the bush. And I mean, we did a ton of research. We played with some ideas. He's done some things I haven't. I'm sure I've done some things he hasn't. And I mean, hopefully we can give you folks an idea of where you should drop your money first, because most of us, we can only afford so many toys at one time. And I know there's things that I have put money into that I really appreciate putting money into with my truck, and there's things that I'm just kind of like, I could have waited. That's not... I thought I'd get more out of it. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. I mean, when you get into this, a lot of people will tell you, oh, you have to do this, you have to do that. And I guess we are going to do that a bit today too, but realize that not everything people say you have to do, you have to do. And you have to judge this for yourself, if that makes sense, right? Like, what do you really need? What do you want out of your vehicle? But there's definitely a few things you want to concentrate on.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the thing. Like Ben said, we are going to kind of tell you what we think. But at the end of the day, it is going to come down to what are you going to be doing with your vehicle? Because there's going to be certain things that may work better for you depending on where you're planning to go, the area you live in. An extreme example I can think of is if you live somewhere where there's a ton of sand dunes, you're probably going to do way better for paddle tires than I would say going through the Rocky Mountains back here in Nova Scotia. You know what I mean?
Rocky Mountains, Nova Scotia.
Well, we are built on rock, basically. They're not big mountains. They're just rocky.
Muffin.
Everything here is granite. You know that. It's granite and quartz.
There's a lot of granite. It is hard ground. I wouldn't call anything mountainous. Maybe the Highlands. But I'm just picking, and I'm picking. But no, I think you hit on my first thing. Tires. By far, tires. You're going to go off-road. You're going to go down forest roads. You're going to go down back roads. You're going to go exploring. I'm a proponent of all-wheel or 4x4, multiple wheels helping you. But truth be known, from history, I've seen it. I will take a solid set of tires over okay tires and all-wheel drive every time. Like if I had two vehicles to choose, one has awesome tires, is two-wheel drive, and the other has questionable tires, but it's all-wheel drive, I'm taking the good tires.
No, 100%, and that's where I wanted to start too. So funny enough, a good set of rubber on your whatever vehicle, car, truck, SUV, Jeep, whatever your flavor is, a good set of what's that? Motorcycle. But yeah, whatever touches the ground, if you can get a good solid set of tires on there, that is the best upgrade you can do by far, starting right out of the gate. One, it's going to help you while you're going through the back roads. It's going to be a little bit more reliable because a lot of the stock tires that come with vehicles, they tend to be seconds and stuff like that. They tend to run a little less on ply. They're not as durable. They burn up a little faster. They're not as aggressive a tread because they want a good balance of stuff. They want a tire that's going to be fairly quiet on the pavement, give you enough traction when you're in, different terrains, mud and snow and stuff like that. Or if you have all seasons, then it's even broader again. It's they're trying to give you a little bit of everything for all seasons, but not really great for any one thing. So I know with my truck, the first thing I did was, after the factory tires were shot, I invested into a decent pair of mud and snow tires, which had a lot more aggressive profile to them, meaning there was more lugs in them. There was more like grooves and stuff, so that when you were in that soupier stuff, it had more places to bite in and pull I'm trying to think of the word I'm looking for here, but soil and stuff into the tires that will actually allow it to crawl along, as well as the tires I went with being mud and snow. They actually do really well when they're aired down as well, and you've heard us talked about this in other past episodes. A lot of times if you get stuck in things like that, you'd be surprised what dropping your PSI in your tires will actually accomplish for you, because it mushrooms it out on the bottom, gives you a little bit bigger contact patch, but you have to have a tire that's going to do it well. If you take your pavement tires and drop PSI in them, then go banging around on the roads, you're not going to have tires left at the end of the day, week, weekend, whatever the case may be, depending how far you're going.
Yeah, and like you, I purchased a set of all-terrain tires to rated mud and snow. They have the snowflake. I can drive them year-round. They are, a true all-round, year-round tire. They are winter rated, but I can drive them in the summer because they were designed for mud and rock. And for my driving, the amount of city driving I'm doing, I'm okay with those more rough tires. Hint, and this is something I do have, if I was going to do a really long road trip with that vehicle, I have good summer tires on rims that I can swamp out. The fact is, for some people, it would be the other way. They would say, I'd leave the all seasons or the summer tires on and just put the off-road ones on when I'm going to off-road. But for me, where I'm more likely to do this on more weekends and stuff, I've flipped it the other way. So generally, I want those in the winter, and then in the summer, if I have a second vehicle, so that is my backup, that's the one I take in the woods. So it's set up that way. But if you can afford it, you can oftentimes find used rims for probably about $100 for the set. If you don't need the best rims in the world, consider that, and then put your good rubber on the second set of rims or one set of rims, and then drive with the other ones with summer or your other tires, your road tires, whatever you want to call them. So that's a hint. It really isn't that much more expensive, and if you think about it, the fact that you can swamp those anytime you want without having to go to the garage, they do pay for themselves relatively quickly. So that's a second mod in conjunction with the tires, is a set of rims for those tires. And if you can go with a bit more of a rugged tire, or even just put the steels on those, you don't have to worry about damaging them anymore. So you don't have to have nice aluminum rims that you're worried about scratching. Mine are aluminum, but they weren't perfect. They were chipped and marked a little bit, so I don't care. I think I spray painted them black and I left them that way, and I'm happy with that. Yeah,
so just one thing to be aware of, folks, before you run out and drop $2,000 on some great big amazing off-roading tires. Keep in mind there is a trade-off to these. Even with the mud and snows and the all-terrains and stuff like that, they tend to not do as well on paved roads. And by not as well, you're going to notice that there's going to be a little bit more feedback through the steering wheel. It's going to feel like you're driving on gravel a lot. It's also going to generally wander over the road a little bit more, just because of the bigger profile on them and the more aggressive tread, as well as they're going to make significantly more noise, or at least in my experience, all the off-road tires that I've run make significantly more noise than like a set of highway tires, for instance. When I first bought my truck, you could hardly hear that thing from inside the cab. Like, it was like, oh yeah, the world exists outside it. Now with my bigger tires on it, you can always hear that kind of hum of the tires on the road. And I know Ben knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah. You mentioned deflating. I did purchase for mine a decent air compressor and a deflating kit, and that lives in the vehicle. And this way, if I want to drop 10, 15 PSI, I hook them up. And what I've kind of realized is I'm okay with waiting a little bit. So now I'm planning on actually setting 2 of them to one pressure and 2 to another pressure. I'm going to mark them, and then I can just do the front 2 and the back 2 rather than having multiple sets. But they're not that expensive. I think I bought my kit for less than $20, and I'm seeing some better ones now, and I might consider even upgrading some point in time. But a deflator kit really isn't that expensive, and a good tire gauge is always a good to have.
So now we talked briefly on tires, because it took 10 minutes out of our 30-minute segment here. There is something that I don't think people should waste their money on right out of the gate, and it's a big thing that a lot of people, as soon as they think off-roading, they want to run right out and get. And this may be controversial, but I'm going to give you my reasons behind it, and I don't think you have one, Ben, so hear me out on this and tell me what you think. I've actually removed it from my vehicle. A winch. For my truck. On my ATV, yeah, I use it a fair bit. On my truck, I didn't really use it because I'm never getting into a spot where I would potentially need it by myself. And if I'm with someone else, generally a tow strap's going to do just as well for me. You know what I mean? And it's a little less intrusive sticking out the front. It's less wiring into the truck. It's really cheap for a decent tow strap, especially if your vehicle has recovery hooks and stuff on it like mine does. But yeah, the winch. So I got it. It was a great idea. It's like, oh, I can pull myself out of anywhere. I can move stuff. And that's the only thing I actually ended up using it for, was moving the odd tree. And I changed it out for a chainsaw, which once again is an optional item. But I did more with the chainsaw than I ever did with the winch. So the winch came off and now it sits in the garage. And it was one of those things that I'm just like, I spent a lot of money on it. And I don't even have it on the truck anymore.
Yeah, I do not have a winch. I've thought about it. What I did carry for the longest time, and I still have it somewhere, is a come-along. And my theory was there I could put some pressure on with that. The old high lift jacks, the ones that are on a pole.
The jackals, yep.
Jackals. A lot of people say they've used those to help move them out of a spot. And what I do keep, that I think helps a lot too, is just a set of traction boards. And there's a lot of options out there for things like that. There's different methods of things you can lay on the ground to get that traction that really will get you out where a winch would also be used. So not necessarily the biggest thing. If you're slipping, you're either A, in enough mud that your chassis starting to float. B, you're on a steep enough slope that's got enough loose gravel that you just can't climb it, which the question is, do you want to go ahead here? It may be a mistake. But yeah, there's that, as similar with snow. But oftentimes, just putting something solid down that it can climb up will definitely help with that. The thing I've heard most people say they use their winch for is to pull somebody else out of it. So if you're going with a large group of people, having one or two people with a winch in that group probably makes sense.
And that's where I found the tow strap was a cheaper, and in a lot of options, I preferred it better over than having to deal with like the cable or the rope or whatever. The tow strap being larger and flatter, it was easier to work with in a lot of the instances that I found. And like I said, significantly cheaper. We're talking over $1,000 for a winch or like $150 tow strap. You know what I mean? And that's a good tow strap because you can get them even cheaper than that.
Oh, yeah. And just know that when you're buying these things, that a good recovery kit, and that's what we'll call it, a recovery kit is important. And that's things like your traction board, your ability to lower your pressure, maybe a couple of tow straps, a come-along or some kind of jack, something that you can get the vehicle, because usually you don't have to winch it far. It's probably only 4 or 5 feet at the most, probably in some cases only a couple of inches. Makes the difference of you getting out of where you're to and not. And if you're wenching yourself any greater distance, you may be putting yourself in a position that's just much, much worse. So that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, some people do end up like ditched and need to pull themselves out of a ditch. If you are using a tow strap, I've experienced this. Make sure that the person pulling isn't plucking it and is actually just putting a steady pressure on. You can do a lot of damage to both vehicles by backing up and then just revving and smacking, because it's really going to hit like a hammer. It's the same idea. It's a hammer.
Excuse me.
So be careful with that.
100%. And on the flip side of that too, there's kind of a knack to using a winch. If you're unsure of how to use a winch, you can do a lot of damage with one of those too. Either way, you're going to have to build a skill set, and it's something worth keeping in mind. And I'm not saying don't buy a winch. I'm just saying it's not what I would throw money down on first. I would definitely buy the tires over a winch 100% of the time. You know what I mean?
Say, like, a winch should have enough power to pick up your vehicle twice, 2 to 3 times.
Yeah.
So you have a 5,000 pound vehicle, you need a 10 to 15,000 pound winch. That's a lot of winch. And if that cable's under that kind of strain, especially if you have a force multiplier, like you have, what do they call them? The
snatch block?
The snatch blocks, and there's a couple of other methods out there. Some of those things can mean you have literally tons of force there. And if that lets go, it will launch you.
Oh
I
man,
think
I have never seen one go, but I have looked at videos and it does not look fun in any way, shape, or form.
no,
Just want to
it'll,
shout. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ben. Finish your thought.
it can cut somebody clean in half. Like,
Oh,
do not
absolutely.
do not underestimate that.
So
Go
just
ahead.
a quick shout out to a couple people here in the comments because I always try to give shout outs there. We got Steve, the Drifting Spore, joining us. We got Kier joining us. Welcome back, Kier. It's been a while since we talked to you. Who else we got here? We got our M Shoots and a couple comments. So back to the tire thing there. Kier, I run a set of Bridgestone Doer mud tires, and they're surprisingly quiet and well balanced even on a soft top Jeep. A snatch strap kinetic rope, in my opinion, is the most useful recovery tool as long as you have multiple vehicles. And Steve, sometimes when you have a winch, you don't always have something to hook one onto within that reach as well, which is once again another limitation, so to say, on a winch. You only have so much cable.
Yeah, and it has to be something in the direction you want to go. So you may find something solid enough, but it may be in an angle that's not going to be overly beneficial, where you can reposition a second vehicle a lot easier. So there's definitely that. Like you, I mean, I'm not using a winch right now. I've never actually owned a winch. I've looked at a lot. That's a lot. I had a portable winch. This is one that you could hook up to different spots and just run it. It didn't hook to the vehicle, but it was the type of winch. I don't know if it would have recovered it, but it was really good for moving objects. So those were kind of cool. It was at Princess Auto, dirt cheap, great idea. So there's options with that. Lighting. I think we should talk a little bit about lighting. It's a huge mod that a lot of people do. Some extra lighting can really be useful if you're off-road, because at this point you're in questionable areas sometimes, and if it gets dark and you're trying to get out, it can be much more difficult. So that extra lighting to light it up is much more important than on a smooth road that has reflective surfaces that tells you when you're in between the lanes, and everything coming around is lit and reflective anyway, so you're not worried about hitting anything. But in the woods, you're in dark environments. Sometimes it's dusty. And I've been in groups, and that dust makes it very blind, and those extra lights makes it easier to see somebody in dust, fog, and poor conditions, rain, snow, things like that. So those extra lights can really be a help. Fog lights are good, and a lot of vehicles come equipped with them, but you can add extra lights. Some people have the light bars on the roof, or just additional side lights to do the shoulder and stuff. And wildlife can be a huge issue in the woods, and that allows you to see that longer, and help prevent having meetings, physical meetings with large mammals.
And I guess my feelings for extra lighting is I agree with you. It definitely is a good thing to invest into. My suggestion on that would be to shop around. I have bought some really cheap LED light bars that work just as good as the really expensive ones. The other thing I may caution on is more is not always better. And location is important on where you put these things. I have gone with buddies and stuff that have more lights on their truck than probably, like a small city. And though it is cool in their eyes and kind of neat to look at, 90% of it serves zero practical use because you're just oversaturating at a certain point. And if the lights aren't pointed in a direction that's useful, they are 100% pointless. You know what I mean? So some tasteful lighting, definitely. I tend to like to get my lighting a little lower. So around where the fog light area is, light bar, I like to have grill mounted instead of top mounted. Not that a top mount run is bad or anything. I just find the grill mounted one gets down lower. And for a lot of the reasons that Ben was saying, like adverse weather and stuff like that, I found for me it worked better. Now that being said, feel free to see what works for you.
And also notice that if you have high lighting and you have overly bright lighting, it oftentimes is more of a distraction to those around you. So you may feel safer, but you may be making the other people around you not as excited to be there. So control your lighting is definitely important, but that extra lighting and the ability to turn it on and off is important. Also, make sure it's installed correctly with proper relays and all that. Otherwise, the electrical problems these things can create are numerous and severe. And I say that because I've had happen to me where added lighting has melted and ignited wires inside. I bought a cheap kit, installed it. There was no relay on it. It smoked one day on the way to school, and I went into the college. College had an automotive course, and the old instructor there laughed at me and he said, "You should have installed a relay, young fella. You should have, they don't come with them, I know, and they tell you that the switch is rated for it, and it's not." And sure enough, that's what happened. My switch ignited on its own. He replaced it all for me with relays, and it was much better. So taking the time to properly set up the lighting really helps. And it may be something, if you don't have the skills, it's worth getting somebody to do for you.
100%. And just like Ben said, the only thing I was going to say on top of that is if you don't have the skills, if you're not willing to put the time in to learn, definitely invest into somebody that knows what they're doing. Relays, external fuses, like fuse blocks, stuff like that. Once you understand how it works, you can do a lot of stuff to your vehicle. But until you know how it works, sometimes you're defeating yourself.
And there's nothing harder to trace than electrical problems.
No, absolutely not. A bad ground, sometimes I've sold vehicles over it. I'm not going to lie. It's just not worth like the hassle of trying to track it down. Anyway, moving right along because we're at 20 minutes in. Another controversial one that I am not so keen on throwing money on right away because I'm trying to flip-flop back and forth here. And I'm curious on your thoughts on this, Ben, because I don't know if they're going to line up with mine. And mine is a lift kit. I'm not saying don't get one. I'm just saying I wouldn't throw one in right out of the gate. I would invest into the better rubber and learning how to navigate a little better first and foremost.
So I haven't invested in a lift kit, and you have to be really careful. A lot of lift kits don't really improve your clearance all that much because depending on how it lifts, it might give you a bit more range, but if your lowest point still your lowest point? And if you think about that, where your tire is mounted, that's the lowest point on most of your vehicles. So if your tire is 6 inches from that point to that point, you lift your vehicle up as much as you want, your drive system is still just where it was before. So you haven't really gained much with that lift kit. You think you did. The only thing is you might be able to put bigger tires on. So a 2-inch lift kit probably only really gains you the ability to put a tire that's a 1-inch longer radius, which means you're only gaining 1 inch at best if you do the tire upgrade at the same time.
And there's where I was coming from on this, is it's not as easy as just flipping a lift kit in and everything is magically better. Like I said, I'm not against them. It's just know what you're getting into. And you kind of hit the nail on the head there, Ben. If your rear end, which is generally going to be the lowest sagging thing, is still sitting at your axle level and you raise the body up, nothing down here has changed. Yes, you can put bigger tires on. So let's say you throw a 6-inch lift kit in. You throw 6-inch bigger tires on, you're gaining 3 inches on the bottom. But you also put in most likely over $1,000 worth of lift kit. On a 6-inch lift, you're probably looking into having to change axles because you're going to have different angles to how these things go out to the hubs and stuff like that. Dry shafts may have to have new connections in them. And I'm not an expert on this. I've just read enough that these are some of the things you can run into. So it can be big money to lift something properly. And if that's a path you want to go...
Universal joints, ball joints, sway bars, all these things can start to fail as you jack things up. The Subaru, like I've been driving, they suggest anything over 2 inches, you're start looking at upgrading other components because they will start failing at a significantly faster rate. I might actually consider a skid plate a better investment than a lift kit.
That was going to be my next point, was a skid plate. Just before we clear this topic, though, good point here, Kier. Lift kit helps with breakover angle, but your diff stays in the same spot. So breakover angle, if you're going to be going up a lot of sharp, steep inclines and stuff like that, like if you have to come across a V like this, your breakover angle is going to be what you can go through there, or vice versa if you're going over something sharp like that. Yeah, it's going to give you a lot more breakover angle for that. You can approach steeper grades, but as I said, if your axle's sitting here and your rear end is on it, that doesn't really change in height in relation to the body.
And one thing to think about, and this is a little off, like if you already have your vehicle, you're not going to do much. Take a look at the vehicles before you buy them and check and see what the clearances are to begin with. I went specifically with my choice of vehicle because it had higher natural clearances than most other vehicles in a similar class, to the fact that I'm already 2 to 3 inches better than some of its competitors.
Well, I was going to say, you and I compared my truck to your car, and you ended up having like an inch more of clearance if I had the stock tires. I think you still have more clearance, even with my upgraded tires, but like stock to stock, you ended up having an entire inch of clearance over a truck.
Yeah, and people don't see it like that. But when I'm driving around, and I looked at this a lot, you would not believe how many ass end of cars I was staring at. And the pumpkin, the rear differential ball, is the lowest point on most trucks, and that's what's going to hit. And so if you're driving along and you manage to smack that guy hard enough and it loses its fluid, you're stuck. Where a lot of these all-wheel drive vehicles, and they have they don't have that pumpkin. They have the center of the vehicle is technically the highest clearance. You do gain that. So take some time to think about that. Breakover is one, and then there's your approach and departure angles. But believe it or not, you can fix a lot of that by simply fixing your front and rear bumpers. And comparing like apples to apples, if you look at a Subaru Forester versus an Outback, a lot of the specs are very similar. The cargo space, the leg room, all very similar things. They're both all-wheel drive vehicles, but the Outback is longer, and a lot of that is your overreach and your aft. So you have poor approach and departure angles on an Outback than you do on a Forester, but it's more usable space, and it's longer and shorter. So a lot of people prefer that rather than stacking things high. So take a look at your vehicle and what's your purpose. But believe it or not, and this is what I'm going to throw out before we get any too far with this, I have seen Honda Civics and Golf, Volkswagen Golfs, where I think some Jeeps would, shudder to go. So really, skill of driving will get you so far that it's not even funny. Old Grand Caravans and the old Caravans, those things, I've seen those in way back in the woods. I've been back there, I'm like shaking my head. Like I got out of my truck one time to walk a road because I was questioning whether it was doable. And I get back there and there's like a Malibu. It's like, how did you do it?
Just because experience, right? And this is why I hesitate on the lift kit as a first upgrade. It gives us false sense of security. You're going to look at a rougher road and be like, oh, the lift kit will take care of that. When in reality, if you had picked your drive a little better, you would have made out a lot better in the end.
So, So with that, know your vehicle, know what it's capable of. Don't be afraid to get out and walk a path before you drive it. I do it a lot of times, especially things I'm questioning. I get out and I take a look at it, and I try and size up what's going to happen. Because, believe it or not, a rock that's sticking 2 or 3 inches out doesn't look that bad. But if the road has an overall arch to it, like if the ruts are down low, that 2-3 inches is actually much worse. Where later on you'll see where the ground has maybe got a V shape to it. You can go over a foot round boulder because it's sitting in a hollow. So you really have to understand the land and make sure you can get around to that or over that. Sometimes the object isn't the problem, it's the road on either side of it that allows you to do that. And sometimes you can lay something down. The traction boards, you can get a couple inches of clearance with just the traction boards.
100%.
And that's something that I consider when I'm looking at a trailer. Like, can I bridge that gap with my traction boards? Can I just put traction boards on either side of that obstacle and use that to give me that clearance? And that's $100. A good set is about $100. So for $100, I have just replaced that 2-inch lift kit easily. And all it means I have to do is get out of my vehicle, which I was going to do to check it out anyways. So, yeah.
Now,
but if you enjoy it, if you like the look, if you plan on doing a ridiculous amount and you find you need it, 100% get it. But
no, and this is what I was going to say. If you are looking into lifting a vehicle, I would suggest starting, if it's available for your truck or whatever, a leveling kit. So with my Ford Ranger, they tend to have that, that slope down in the front end, aggressive stance. But if you put a leveling kit in that automatically gives you the ability to put larger tires on it right away. And the leveling kit's only about $200 for those things, and it bolts right in. You don't have to affect any other thing on the truck. You can actually buy the leveling kit straight from Ford, and it's an approved part, which is hilarious enough for the Ranger. And like I said, that allows you to put another whole inch of tire, rim size on there, plus a little bit more in aspect ratio. So for the $200, you end up gaining like 1.5 inches of clearance all the way around, and it gets the front end up so that when you cut your wheels, and here's the other thing that you have to think about with lift kits and stuff like that, is your wheels as they turn, if you put bigger tires on, could now start rubbing on things, which a lot of people overlook until the first time they take a real hard turn and rip an inner fender off. And like I said, the leveling kits, generally the stock ones for these vehicles from the dealers or whatever, they're going to take into a lot of this and tell you what the max size tire is going to be that you can put on and still be able to run everything pretty smoothly. And like I said, it's something you can do at home. For mine, it's at the top of the shock mounts in the front, undo 3 bolts, jack up the front end a little bit, slap these 2 spacers on, bolt it all back down, done. Like 15-minute mod.
And mentioning that, you said something. I'm a fan of rubber. So if I was to change something, I will go to the smallest rim I can fit on it and then put the largest tire I can fit in there. So my road tires, the all-season tires, that are the summer tires, whatever you call, they are on a 1 inch higher rim than my off-road tires. I went with the smallest rim that I could fit on it, and in the biggest tire. So the overall length and width, and there's forms that for almost every vehicle I've looked at, there's a form where someone will tell you how big of a tire you can squeeze in there, and if you want bigger, what you have to do, what pieces of plastic you can remove, melt down and reshape that still fit without rubbing against something metal or damaging your tire. Do you realize too that as you put a bigger tire in there, that any rocks and stuff you pick up and get tucked into your tire, that's also going to potentially rub. So it's nice to have a little bit of clearance. Keep that in mind. Snow and ice, too, can do a lot of damage to your vehicle because it gets trapped into that area and can tear things up.
No, 100%. And we're at 30 minutes, so I did want to talk about the last thing we kind of already hinted at there, was skid plates or bash plates. Now, for me, my vehicle came with it, but it was a requirement for when I bought the vehicle, and I actually do use mine. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm banging through stuff and smashing the rear end or whatever off of rocks, but if you're going through mud and stuff, it just gives something smooth for the body to roll across, especially if I'm going through some water or something like that and I'm not 100% sure what's under it, or some soupy mud or something like that, and you're just not 100% sure what's under there. As long as you can go in nice and slow, it gives you that one last ditch of protection, and 2, it also keeps a lot of mud and crap from going up into the vehicle, which adds additional weight, which will start robbing from your stability. It'll start dragging your body of your truck down, getting rid of the clearance you do have. I found it just kept things a lot more clean and out from under the truck that once I got back from being in the woods, not that I go mudding, I'm not a mudding kind of guy, but I have gotten in dirt roads where it gets soft and I'm like, no, I have a truck, we're going through it, you know what I mean? But I don't necessarily go looking for it. As well as if you are into that soupy stuff, it actually kind of, I'm not going to say it allows you to float, but it does give some surface resistance so you don't sink down as much, if that makes any kind of sense. On the flip side of that, it also gives a place where stuff can pile up in front of you.
I have a discount right now, and I'm really debating it. Skid plates, it's hit or miss. I really do. Like, if you ever need it, you'll damn well wish you had it. And there's the thing is, if you damage your oil pan, if you damage your differential, you damage your transmission, and that would have protected it, that's I can buy a full set for my vehicle for around $1,000. If I go in the backwoods and I get really stuck and I have to call a tow truck to get in, I'm guarantee I'm paying $1,000 to get towed out. So in that argument, like I said, it pays for itself the one time you need it. And the fortunate thing is, the one time you need it, you may not even know you did it, because you may hit it and you say, "Oh, that was rough. Oh, I hit a bump," but you don't realize that may have saved your vehicle. That may have saved you a tow job right there. There's one piece of equipment I have strapped to mine that I did want to mention. It's permanently strapped to the side of my vehicle.
Just before you go to that, I had a last thought on skid plates. Then we'll go to yours and we'll sign off for the night before our show gets too late. The only thing I want to add in onto skid plates, be aware what skid plates you're getting. And they go by different names. There's skid plates, bash plates, things like that. Bash plates generally go around the front end. They're going to cover the front diff. They also usually have a little bit of an angle on it that kind of goes up to your bumper that seals everything in. That way, if you were to hit something, it's going to lift the vehicle and kind of glide over it. You can get skid plates. A lot of times you can get one for the transmission, which I got on my truck. So I got a front bash plate and a transmission cover, as well as I got a gas tank skid plate. And it just keeps things from getting fetched up into your gas tank. Now, one I would like to get, but I haven't yet, is another little bit of a bash plate for the rear end. But it's another one of those things I'm not in a hurry to get it, because if the front end hits it, chances are I'm not going to try and keep going over it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, true. There's also rock sliders you can get. And that sits underneath your rocker guards, and if you ever hit something, that would allow you to like slide along the rock rather than have your vehicle tear up. And that, honestly, you hit something like that, it'll prevent your doors from even opening or closing.
On that note, I don't got rock sliders, but I do got running boards, or the side steps that you see on some trucks, and I got mine a little bit more reinforced than the cheapies that you get. And just going through the woods, and the branches and stuff coming in and little trees, it has a tendency to keep most of those away from the paint of my truck so that I'm not constantly scratching my truck and stuff up. I mean, it's not why I bought them. I bought them because Lily and Melissa are a little too short to jump up into the truck and they needed to step up. And frankly, I'm not very tall either, and I enjoy them. But that was the side thing, was they deflect a lot of crap from actually coming up and rubbing on the doors and fenders. And, well, not the fenders, but the doors and stuff like that.
So the other things I was going to mention, and these aren't vehicle mods, but they kind of are. I have a shovel permanently mounted in my vehicle. And honestly, if I get stuck, that shovel can be a lifesaver. And I'll probably mention spare fuel. Honestly, a fuel tank. If you're going to go in, you never know. If you get stuck, if you have to worry around something, or if the path you were planning on taking all of a sudden becomes impassable and you have to go back a ways, that extra 10, 15, 20 liters of fuel may make the difference between you making it out and you calling for help.
No, 100%. I carry a spare fuel cell with me. It's just one of those ATV ones with those little like twist lock mounts on it. I got one for the ATV so I can slap it on the front if I'm taking that. And I got one mounted in the back of the truck where I can just slap it into that. I usually carry it on the truck, and if I'm towing the bike and I switch to the bike, I just pop it off the truck, throw it on the bike.
Yeah. So those are some things I carry. I like to have on my vehicle. There's also, and we won't get into that, maybe this is another whole episode, what tools I carry to do repairs when I travel. And maybe we can talk with that with maybe for my motorcycle. So
I was going to say, this would be a great topic to roll right into for next week if you want to, Ben. Just to kind of continue on with tonight's theme, in all honesty. I just don't want to run the episode too late here tonight because, as we've said in the past, we have found that our metric show, we probably already lost about half years after we passed that 30-minute mark.
So we'll let you go. Do know we have a lot more we can talk about. I have a whole other vehicle that I've done up, and it's done up differently because it is smaller. But let us know. Reach out. If this is something you want to hear about, let us know, because if that's what you want, we can bring it in. We can maybe even bring some more stuff with us. But yeah, hope you enjoyed the show, and you have a great night, and you can do anything else you want.
That's it. Ben said it all. We'll see us next week, folks. I think the idea for right now is we'll continue on this topic and talk about toolkits. See you then, folks. Have a good night.